So, hello my darling humanoids. Unfortunately, in this video, we are gonna have to discriminate a little bit against the reptiloids, androids, and asteroids because unfortunately, I don't know how y'all's nervous system works. Because today, we're talking art therapy. So first of all, I would like to make a statement that I believe this video is more timely than ever with all of this artificial intelligence hype around how AI is going to replace artists and etc. etc. Because thing is, although I do see how AI will likely and is already actively replacing artists and art in terms of its commercial application, there is just one realm that I believe art will never be able to be replaced in, and that is art therapy. Because you see, since the start of human development, art was used first and foremost as a way not just to communicate, but to express one's experiences. And under experiences, that also implies emotional experiences, so feelings, sensations, and the unique perception of an individual. So, although, yes, artistry might not be required anymore to sell anything art wise, art is still a very unique characteristic to human beings in the sense that we can still use it to transmute our own emotions, to give our internal sensations an outwards outlet, which is one of the key parts of therapy, to be honest, which is the key part of having mental stability and sanity, is being able to take all that is piled up inside of yourself and just release it. So, in a sense, one could say that it is actually, in a way, a liberating process that AI is taking over all of the commercial artwork, because now art can once again be used for its original intention, which is expressing oneself, not trying to sell it for money, which also creates competition and undermines a lot of people's individual and unique skills and means of expressing themselves, including their style, their ability in work, and so on and so forth. Because I also truly do believe that a lot more people would be into expressing themselves through art if there wasn't this competitive edge that is created by capitalism that makes people compete in terms of their skill and how likable their artwork is. So yeah, now that art is not an essential part of commercial design work, let's learn how to use art for ourselves, for actually working through whatever we have piled up inside of us, and learn how to express what is in here and in here onto the page properly. Properly meaning just in a way that could work whatever your skill level is. Even if you have never drawn in your whole life, art therapy can still be an amazing tool to use in order to process your thoughts, in order to communicate with your subconscious mind, with the collective subconscious, and etc. And that is actually another delineation that I would like to make, that art is actually an amazing tool in order to read the kind of vibes or the background themes of human development and subconscious collective mind state through viewing the ways that the artists in particular time periods were expressing themselves and whatever artwork was the most popular. So yeah, again, in today's video, let's learn to speak to our unconscious through expressing ourselves on a page, in this video on a page in particular, because that just happens to be my main realm of self-expression aside from speaking and dancing. So first of all, I'm just going to list what art therapy techniques are generally the most popular ones, and then I'm going to dive deeper into explaining how each one works and how you can go about working with it, so that after this video you can just choose whatever one resonates with you, whatever one seems the easiest and the most natural to you, and try and practice it on your own. So if we were to go in the order of the easiest to the most difficult one, the easiest one perhaps would be just hand painting. Because as you might remember from your own childhood, that is essentially what we all start with. We just grab a bunch of paint, put it on our hands, smear them, and just do stuff on a page. The next one, in terms of difficulty, especially for adults, I would say is just drawing shapes. Because all it really requires is some basic knowledge of psychosemiotics, which you can go and look at my previous videos for in order to understand what psychosemiotics are, and how to basically use them for this. But because so many adults across their lifetime tend to push away art as a form of self-expression, they forget how to be free on a page, and the best they can do is just draw some geometric shapes because that is the last thing they remember how to draw from school. The next easiest one is sculpting, but unfortunately I won't really be able to demonstrate this one in this particular video because I don't have any clay or Play-Doh with me today. But it is essentially taking all of the concepts of hand painting, but instead using all of those same things in clay. Next, in terms of difficulty, once you have kind of freed up your hand and are able to not just stick to a linear way of expressing yourself in a particular order, I would say is unconscious writing, where you just let yourself write whatever comes to your mind at random places on a page and then interpret your writing. And it essentially becomes an artwork of your own if you do it right. Then the next one I would say is collage because it requires you to cut out some shapes or find pictures to compile together in order to actually express yourself. So you have to already have some taste, I could say, or some sense of what is a thing that resonates with you, what it is that is an image that resonates with your emotional state. So that already requires some more self-awareness than the previous methods. Then next I would say is mindless drawing with conscious additions because that actually requires you to both be able to draw and just let your hand free unconsciously, and then to be able to interpret your own work, look at it and see particular shapes and once again find resonance within particular symbols that you see arise from the page after the unconscious drawing and adding conscious elements on top of it. Then next in terms of difficulty, I would say self-portraiture because that usually requires an individual to already allow themselves the freedom to not judge themselves, to not judge their own skills in drawing. Because, yeah, of course, for self-portraiture, you don't actually need to be a good artist because it is you expressing the way that you feel about yourself and it doesn't need to make sense for anybody aside from you. But an issue that comes up with people when they try to do self-portraiture is that they're just too shy or they restrict themselves or they judge themselves and they say that, oh no, I could never draw myself. I'm so bad at drawing humans. Well, newsflash, you don't actually need to be able to draw humans in order to do self-portraiture, but because that unconscious restriction does exist in a lot of people who are non-artistic, I'm just gonna put that down on the list in terms of difficulty. Then one of the most difficult types of art therapy, I would say, is intention-led drawing, because that actually requires you to already be in active communication with your unconscious, first of all, and second of all, that requires you to have already overcome this fear barrier of, oh, I don't know how to draw, and just have the bravery to just draw symbols and shapes that you know are resonating with how your emotions are feeling in the moment. And the most difficult out of the common art techniques, I would say, is drawing mandalas, which was popularized by Carl Jung, because that actually requires you to understand the structure of a mandala in order to be able to actually interpret what you have drawn. So now, shall we actually dive into the demonstrations and explanations? Yes, we shall. Let's go. So before we actually begin to practice, let's just remember some general principles that we should be informed of before we embark into creating any sort of art, especially in therapeutic purposes. So as I mentioned in my previous video about psychosemiotics, there are three basic shapes that humans perceive the world in. So there's the triangle that symbolizes movement. It can also symbolize aggression and anything that in your mind, when you think of sharpness, it is associated to that. Then the circle, which is obviously round, smooth, so it's usually something that is whole, that is balanced, infinite, just all of those nice sensations, you know. And then the square, obviously four sides, the most stable shape. So a square is stability, but it can also symbolize anything that is an institution, a structure, essentially anything that is there, at least initially, in order to create a sense of stability and reliance. So now that we got the general shapes down, let's talk about line work. So from the three main shapes, we can derive all sorts of line making techniques for our future art pieces. So akin to the triangle, any lines that you draw with that are more angular, depending on how regular, how sharp, how small, or how large the actual angles of the sharp line are, will depend what kind of emotion you're portraying with it. Similarly to also more rounded, softer lines that have curvature to them, because, for example, having large, smooth curves that are especially consistent in your work most likely means just peace, could mean feeling alive, could symbolize some kind of a rhythm to existence. Whereas very, very small wobbles on a line would usually portray an individual being highly nervous or anxious, because just think about it, when you're experiencing some kind of an anxiety and you try to draw a straight line, how does it come out? Wobbly. So circular shapes are not always all this good, okay? And then we can also interpret the line making that we use in our works in terms of direction, in terms of relation to each other, in terms of whether they cross each other or not. What is placed above, what is placed below can represent the significance that we place upon a certain matter, can represent how much more impactful a certain situation is, or how positive or negative we feel about a certain situation. And then there's obviously the last piece, which is the rhythm in your work. So if there's consistent rhythm, then obviously that's consistency. Once again, stability in your life, something maybe being controlled and conscious. And if particular lines or shapes are inconsistent and placed in a chaotic manner, then obviously that symbolizes chaos in that aspect of your life that you're representing with that line or with that shape. So, as we've already stated, the simplest practice to begin with is hand painting, because that is where we all start as little babies. And really, it's that simple because, as you can see here, you literally just get the colors that appeal to you and pretty much throw them on a page while expressing whatever feelings are rising within you. So, actually, to do that before you even embark on drawing, it's good to actually tap into how you're feeling. So if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling upset, if you're feeling angry, or any of those not too pleasant feelings, just really, really feel through them and think, well, not really think, but feel, but you can also think if you're not really that into feeling yet, what colors you reckon would represent your sensations in the best way, and then grab those colors and start just once again throwing them on the page. And really, you can punch the page, you can scratch the page, just do pretty much anything. So especially if it is anger or aggression at somebody, or sadness, you can just really get into the practice by getting really, really physical with the page. Then, after that initial self expression, what you want to start doing is actually processing whatever has just initially come up by tapping into all of the nuances and the more underlying or related sensations and thoughts, or trying to think about what cause there was to those sensations that you have just so aggressively or miserably or sadly or happily. It could be happily or anxiously. There are so many different feelings that you could have expressed. So just really start thinking about where they came from, what is the stem root, what are the underlying reasons and themes that are related to the topics that you have just been expressing. And obviously, just keep painting throughout this whole process. And as you keep painting, you can also think about the consequences of whatever sensations just came up, or whatever actions you want to do that are related to those sensations. What would be the consequences of you processing things this way, of you interpreting life this way, so on and so forth. So, the core of this practice is really just feeling your feelings, even crying about them, while grounding those sensations by constantly staying in touch with a physical medium such as a page, for example. So, a good way to actually begin and embark on a self expressive practice, especially in terms of transmuting your feelings and using it to get rid of something negative that is arising within you or something overwhelming, is to write out how you feel in the moment. Especially if you're not used to expressing yourself through art, then most likely you have at least at some point written to somebody how you feel. So you can start out by setting an intention of what kind of sensations you want to release by just stating on the side of your piece of paper or on a notepad somewhere, or even just in your mind, confronting exactly what feelings are arising, perhaps what associations to those feelings you have, or what was the cause to those feelings, and really getting all of those sensations and situations all together in one pile in your mind, in your heart for the moment. And then using the basic knowledge that we have already discussed, or not even using it, just going along with how your hand works, as we have already practiced with our hand drawings, just really allowing your hand to roam free on the page if you can. And if you cannot, start drawing intentionally with the basic shapes that we have already discussed. Where, once again, as you're processing a particular situation or sensations inside of you, most likely those sensations are associated to certain people, places, and things. And then to enhance this practice further, we would look at the color circle where each color is associated to some particular feeling or sensation, as we have also discussed in our previous psychosemiotic video. Honestly, you don't really need to study this because chances are you already have particular associations to each color just based off of your living experience. So this ain't that deep, but just keep it in mind. As especially a good practice is to actually draw and color things in without thinking too much about them, just that you're writing out the intention first and then just going at it at the page in the way that feels right to you without putting too much thought into it. And then after you're done drawing, sitting down with all of this knowledge and looking at what you have expressed and interpreting it through the knowledge of the color symbolism, the shape symbolism, the mark making symbolism, and combining that with the intention that you have set. So how does it resonate? What does each part of your drawing represent? Why does it represent that? Why does this particular thought that is in your mind while you were drawing that particular line represented in that line and that shape? And basically just read into your drawing a lot. Then our next practice is unconscious drawing combined with conscious interpretation. So you would start this one with just drawing a bunch of squiggles on the page, just that you're going at it while, once again, having the initial intention in your mind. So because you're intending to get rid or process some emotional situation, you think about it as you're doing this drawing and you just kind of doodle, you go at it once again. And then once you have completed the little quick squiggle, what you do is you try to find particular shapes, animals, people, scenarios, recognizable objects in the doodles that you have bestowed upon the page. So you can see in my demonstration here, I found some kind of a running person shape, which I added some eyes to make it look like an actual individual. Then I found like a horse somewhere, I found a fish, I found a dramatic woman, so on and so forth. And so after just doing a bunch of coloring in of all of those things that I have discovered, after I have discovered them and added to them, I can now go through and interpret once again in retrospect the drawing, what I have drawn, why I have drawn it. So the next one, neurographics, is a slightly more advanced technique, but essentially it is very, very similar to the using simple shapes for self-expression technique that we have discussed. But this time we have an added element where on top of symbolizing very particular events, sensations, and situations or characters as the three basic shapes, we also add some squiggly lines on top of it. And really, when you're drawing these lines, don't think about it. What you should be aiming to do is drawing these lines that you see me drawing as chaotically as possible, because essentially in neurographics these lines are supposed to symbolize creating new neural connections once we're done with this process. Once you're done drawing the lines, what you want to do is the long and tedious process, but the very, very necessary process of joining the lines together and smoothing them out So the point of neographics is to not leave a single angle in the drawing, because once again, if you remember what we went over, angles, especially sharp angles, represent stress or anxiety or the sharp points, the stress points in our lives at the moment. So essentially what neographics does is by crossing over the matters, which are symbolized by the simple shapes with the squiggly lines, and then rounding out the squiggly lines along with the shapes, we are creating new neural connections in associations to the events that were symbolized by those shapes. And we are bringing ourselves into the acceptance of the situation and allowing our brain to process the situation properly while we're doing this whole rounding out process, because it does take quite some time. And that is why I would recommend using a brush pen and not like a thin little pen or pencil. But while you're doing this, each shape that you round out, each angle that you round out, gets rid of a tiny bit of stress and strain from within you. And then after you're done rounding out all of the corners so that everything is lovely and smooth and circular, what we want to do is to once again color in our creation, just fill it in as is with the colors that you either associate with the matter or the colors that you associate with the solution to the matter. And another good neographics practice is actually to use the colors that you feel the most aversion to, especially in that moment. So you will have a natural inclination to use very, very particular colors, but instead of using the color that you're inclined to use, go for the color that is absolutely opposite to it, or that you just would never use, and use that one instead. Because by integrating and using the colors that we wouldn't be inclined to use and going against our desires, essentially what we're doing is practicing acceptance of what is, which is what this whole neographics process is about. It's just about accepting, processing, and letting go of whatever the situation is. Then, for our next practice, if going above in the order of difficulty, you might actually need some artistic skill at this point, at least to be able to draw a stick figure or something that you would recognize as a shape. Because once again, we don't need to be good artists for others. All we need to do for all of these practices is be good enough artists to be able to interpret the stuff that we draw ourselves. And so for this practice, really, I'm just going to quickly scroll through it. What you could do to process your emotions through art therapy is draw the past, the present, and the future of either your life or the situation that you have encountered, or something that you are feeling ungrounded about, that you are not able to stay present with them, where you are either getting too caught up in thinking about the future or reminiscing about the past. So you could draw out either your past, like your childhood, or the past of even your nation, which I have kind of done here, or just the past as in like literally yesterday, if you're trying to process a situation that has just occurred. And while you draw it, put attention on the things that you believe have impacted your situation right now that you're trying to process in a moment. Then draw the present moment, how you see it, how you feel within it. Use colors, use shapes once again to evoke particular associations that make sense to you in order to process your emotions and properly express what your feelings are right now. And then draw the future, preferably in a very, very hopeful and excited manner, or at least in a somewhat pleasant or calm manner, where you draw a resolution to your current situation and or problem. So you either draw the actual process of the resolution, or you draw the consequences of the resolution of the situation that you're in, or you're just drawing the future that you would like to see. Then our next practice, the self-portrait, is obviously the next in difficulty. And this one is really, really up to you. Just at this point, if you're able to draw yourself in a way that makes sense to you, that you don't get upset with, chances are you already kind of got the hang of this artistic expression thing. So if you're using a self-portrait in order to process a certain situation, I would say that the best applications for this technique in particular is a kind of self-evaluation tool where you draw a self-portrait as means of looking at yourself from the side, because it is very, very easy to get very attached to the way that we feel and to our experiences when we're experiencing them from within ourselves. Now, this might not make sense to everybody. How do you experience life as outside of yourself? But that is kind of the point of what a lot of self-improvement and stoic and spiritual practices encourage, or philosophies encourage, is the ability and the skill to detach from experiencing life as an attack on you as an individual right now, to instead look at life in a more distant manner, where you detach from associating yourself to just this physical body, to just you that you think you are right now, and transcending to the realization that you are not this body, you're more than just this body, you're more than a human being, you're more than just a compilation of these atoms and particles, you're something way beyond it. And anyway, so this whole process can be greatly aided by doing self-portraits where you look at yourself as kind of a character. And in order to resolve a particular situation or sensation that you have, what you could do is what I've been doing here in this drawing this whole time, is drawing yourself as a character as you are right now, and then drawing your process of resolving the situation that you're trying to overcome, resolve, transmute, and drawing yourself at the point where you have already gone past it and are happy and done with everything. And our last practice for today is going to be drawing the mandala, which is a practice, once again, introduced to psychoanalysis by Carl Jung, but taken from Buddhist and Hindu temples, where mandala originally means sacred circle. So what you do for this one is obviously draw a circle, first and foremost, and then draw some divisions into equal parts of the circle. You could set an intention for the mandala as to what you want it to represent, but really, if we're going about it in the original way, what you do is just start drawing it without setting any intention, just literally sitting down and starting to draw it from the center, because the mandala is not supposed to represent a particular emotional situation in the moment, although it could. It could happen that if something is a priority for you, it does take over the whole self expression thing. But really, what the mandala represents is you. So you just start drawing it from the center, going outwards, and instead of making all of the parts of the mandala symmetrical on purpose, what especially I found helpful is to visually divide the circle into the measured parts that you like. So I've divided it kind of into four here. And then instead of repeating the certain patterns that come out on one of the sides, I just go in and properly zone in and put all of my attention into each one of the sides properly and individually. So not trying to replicate the other sides, just seeing what comes up to me as I'm looking at this particular side of the circle. So what pattern am I seeing? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Am I seeing some kind of characters? Am I feeling like I want to draw a particular symbol? Do I want to write a number? Do I want to write a word? All of those things are applicable and can be done. This is really a free for all. And so after going through the whole process of drawing out the mandala as far as you feel like you need to extend it, what you do is take the charts that were proposed by Carl Jung once again, or his contemporaries, and look at what associations you make with every part of the chart. So in your mandala, you have most likely either used forms and shapes to symbolize particular sensations or people or things, or you have actually ended up drawing actual people, animals, and situations out properly. So then you look at the drawings that came out, you look at the chart, and you see what each part of the chart represents, and how what you have drawn in that part of the chart symbolizes something about your attitude towards that aspect of yourself, whether it is the animus, the anima, whether it is a representation of your ego or how you feel about your ego, whether it is a message from the collective unconscious or it is your own shadow self. The whole mandala is a way for the different parts of yourself to communicate to yourself and between each other. So I hope that you found the video helpful, and just doing a little check-in because I literally just moved back to London, hence such a late upload, the whole moving thing taking a while. And I'm just going to round this video out slightly in a disjointed way from the rest of it. But once again, now that you have seen all of the kind of key art therapies that are out there, obviously I encourage you to look into more nuanced ones, more niche types, but I hope that the roundup that I've done is enough for you to kind of understand what your capacity is for art therapy and where would be a good place for you to start your search. So don't be shy, be expressive, feel your feelings, and let them out in a lovely and peaceful way through self expression. I would also like to add that there is obviously so many other modes of self-expression through art, because there's also, as I mentioned at the start of the video, dancing, then there's music, then there's just creative writing, there's filmmaking. Pretty much any form of art that exists is a great way to transmute your emotions. But thing is, just because I'm the most proficient at visual art, that is what I am able to introduce you to. The principles that I have spoken about and all of the traditional art techniques that I just told you about can basically be applied to all other models of art, where essentially at the start, before doing something artistic, if you want to do it intentionally as a therapeutic practice, all you need to do is get your thoughts together, get your feelings together, properly let yourself feel into them, understand what your feelings are, kind of arrange them into different typologies, name every feeling, understand what it's supposed to feel like, what it feels like to you, set the intention before embarking on the practice to either get over the feeling, to process it, to understand it, to lean more into it, or to replace it with more productive feelings, and embark on the actual practice. Or just set the intention at the start of the practice to even feel your feelings. And then as you get into the practice, just listen to what is coming up inside of you, inside of your intuition, inside of your heart, inside of your brain. And then track those thoughts and feelings and how they change as you keep expressing yourself in your artwork. To, at the end, come out of it with your feelings having been transmuted. And how do you know that they have been transmuted? Because you feel more at peace. You feel like either you're exhausted to the place of peace, or you feel like you have actually resolved something inside of yourself. And if you haven't come to a resolution, then most likely you should also do another artistic practice later on when you have more energy once again. So yeah, I hope that was succinct enough. I hope you understood everything. And good luck picking what type of art form is suitable to you. So yeah, bye bye, and wish me luck here in London.